Welcome to Anews. I'm Umar Taslim, and you're watching Turkey's Diplomacy. With conflicts raging across the Middle East, Turkey finds itself at the center of fast-moving diplomatic and security shifts. On today's episode, Daily Sabah's editorial coordinator, Dr. Mehmet Çelik, and strategic affairs expert, Dr. Hamid Khan, will join me to discuss Ankara's expanding influence and the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, which has claimed the lives of 57,000 innocent civilians.
Cumhurbaşkanlığı hükümet sistemi kökleştikçe Türkiye yüzyılının inşası inşallah daha da hızlanacak.
Turkey's presidential cabinet convened under the chairmanship of President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan in the capital of Ankara on Monday.
Yönetim sistemimizdeki bu tarihi kazanımın geliştirilerek muhafazasını Türkiye'nin istikbal yolculuğu bakımından çok önemsiyoruz.
The Turkish leader highlighted Turkey's diplomatic efforts to draw international attention to the humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
Aralarında Amerika Başkanı Sayın Trump'ın da olduğu pek çok liderle bir araya gelerek ikili ilişkilerimizi ve gündemdeki meseleleri ele aldık. Hem kapalı toplantıda hem de liderlerle olan görüşmelerimizde Gazze'de 21 aydır devam eden zulme dikkat çektik.
The Turkish leader also welcomed the decision for Turkey to host the 2026 NATO Heads of State and Government Summit.
Lahey zirvesinin bizim açımızdan ehemmiyeti bir sonraki zirve adresinin ülkemiz olarak belirlenmesiydi. 2026 NATO devlet ve hükümet başkanları zirvesine İnşallah Temmuz ayında Türkiye ev sahipliği yapacak. Bu vesileyle NATO liderlerini başkentimiz Ankara'da ağırlayacak, çok mühim kararların alınmasına zemin hazırlayacağız.
Welcome back to the program. Dr. Mehmet Çelik, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Omar.
Dr. Mehmet, let's start with Erdoğan's press conference that he held after the cabinet meeting yesterday. There were some important things that he spoke about. The first one, which was the presidential system. He also spoke about the NATO summit that's going to be held in Ankara next year. But Mehmet, there's something else that I want to talk about, and the president mentioned that as well, and that's the Terror-Free Türkiye initiative. Now, there are some reports, Mehmet, that I want to go through and inform you and our audience about what's going on, and then we'll get your analysis. Now, Ankara, obviously we spoke about that it's going to hold the NATO summit, and we've been seeing how important Turkey has been over the past few months and years in terms of, mediating conflicts and other issues that we see, not just regionally, but also globally. So another issue that, Turkey has been facing for the past 40 years has been the threat of PKK terrorism, the attacks in which over 40,000 people have lost their lives. Now, Mehmet, this week, the PKK is going to lay down its arms in the city of Süleymaniye in Iraq, which is considered to be the hub of the PKK. This initiative, which we know started last year in November after MHP's leader, Devlet Bahçeli, he brought this initiative and he said that we should end terrorism in Turkey by, accumulating all the people together. Now, Mehmet, this week could be a crucial one because Erdoğan has said that we do not want anyone to sabotage this process. How are you analyzing this process, Mehmet? Because the DEM party leaders, they've been also meeting Abdullah Öcalan, who is the leader of the terrorist organization. How are you looking at this entire situation, Mehmet? And could peace finally prevail in Turkey?
Well, Omar, you provide a very good background for what does it mean to have this terror-free initiative in Turkey. PKK terrorist organization, when we look at its structure, it is not one that is very homogeneous, first of all, and also it's not one that has this command and control and hierarchical structure that is very vertical. It is actually a group of different elements that is run by a command and control center, for the lack of a better word, which is called the KCK, the community that, as they call it, that is, it acts as an umbrella organization, but there's different branches in different countries, and in Europe there is a different power group within PKK. In northern Syria, northern Iraq, there's different fractions and different groups. Nevertheless, they're all under the umbrella of KCK, which is the PKK. In Turkey, it is the YPG. In northern Syria, it is the PJAK in Iran, etc. So, the very nature that the PKK has different fractions makes it very difficult to manage it, actually. For that reason, when there is a political wing, for example, or the sympathizers or politically affiliated party in the parliament, when they are having these negotiations with the government or with the state, with different parties, the PKK is armed. The armed groups within the PKK, different armed groups, they can have a different say. They don't necessarily have a consensus all the time. Sometimes some of these fractions can, as Mr. Erdoğan said, can sabotage these groups within the PKK itself. Because of this nature of the group that is very, has a lot of different branches, so there's a lot of different power groups within the organization itself. So due to this facts and this reality, I think the process itself has been very long as well. So, Mr. Erdoğan is basically saying, we've started this negotiation or this process or this initiative, but time is ticking. It is not something that we can tolerate, as the process itself is a very fragile one. It can be sabotaged not only by the different fractions within the PKK, but also by PKK is a group that is very, very easily managed by external factors. So at one time you can see, let's say, the Israel has a motivation to ignite some groups within the PKK to sabotage this process, because this is something that will bring stability and peace to the region, and it is not only something that is important for security of Turkey, but it's also an important process for the region's stability. PKK has been acting as a destabilizer, not only in northern Syria and along Turkey's border, but Turkey has been fighting the PKK within its borders for the past 4 decades. PKK is active in northern Iraq. PKK has different elements as destabilizers in different parts of Iran. So when this is removed from the region, not only the countries will benefit from that and will have this stability in the region, but also the Kurds themselves will be detached from this group that gives them a bad name, basically, right? I think there's one of the biggest mistakes the international media or the Western media or international community does is to put the PKK and the Kurds as an ethnic group along all these 3-4 countries as if they are the same thing in the same basket. They are not, of course. There's millions of Kurds who do not support the PKK. So when we talk about this stability that this process is aiming to bring, it will bring stability not only in terms of security, but also in terms of, I think, social dynamics in the region as well. There's a people-to-people connection that is very strong historically, and PKK has damaged that quite significantly along for the people's region. And when that is removed, I think that will also bring that social coherence. When these two are established, security and social dynamics are positively unfolding, then I think it will bring also economic impact, economic implications will be in place for the region as well. Because when there is Turkey's southeastern border or southeastern region suffered for many years due to these terrorists. Due to security operations against the PKK terrorist group. Now that that is removed, that is minimized, we see a very good economic activity taking place there. We see development flourishing there. We see Turkey is even exploring in different parts for oil now. So, I think that security element is not only important for sovereignty and safety of citizens, but it also opens a way or paves the way for different realms to be activated, to be reignited again for the welfare of and well-being of the people's regions.
Mehmet, tell me about Abdullah Öcalan. This week, Dem Party leader Pervin Buldan, she said that the party is going to hold meetings with Devlet Bahçeli, President Erdoğan, and also CHP leader Özgür Özel. So what do you make of this statement? And like you mentioned before as well, that there are subgroups within the PKK. Do you think this is more like a power struggle between Öcalan and other members who are in the party? Because when you look at what's happening and how important Öcalan has been for this process, he has said that, Dem Party has said that Öcalan is going to release a message as well this week. So how are you looking at his stance? How are you looking at his position? And how important is he in order for the PKK terrorist group to, lay down their arms?
Well, Öcalan, as you know, is the ringleader of this terrorist group. He's basically has been in jail for many years because of the suffering that people had to deal with given PKK's terrorist activity. So he's not, he's the leader of a baby-killing terrorist group. Nevertheless, for this process for this initiative to actually be activated or to be effective, his influence over the PKK terrorist group and different branches and different factions is of course important. And his communication with them is also important for that reason. But when we talk about the PKK, we should not forget that this is also an organization that manages different power activities, be it financial power, be it military power, be it influence over people. So there is a big mechanism, big structure that different leadership within the group are maybe not willing to lose, maybe not willing to sacrifice or compromise from their power when it comes to control over that structure. For that reason, for example, whether the leadership or some of the figures, the key terrorist leaders in Kandil Mountains, will be on the same page with some of the key members in Europe, that's something that we're unsure yet. Whether even though there's a coherence, let's say, between the Dem Party and Öcalan, whether this axis has the same outlook as the Kandil Mountain, that's a different story. Or the YPG, how they will act actually in northern Syria. So when this is all the case, I think it not only delays the process, but it makes it a very fragile one. Öcalan is historically, of course, one of the founders of the group. His terror activities, like the bloodshed that we had to deal with, is due to how he managed the organization, the terrorist group. But there's new actors in the group now, so their influence is still very strong. I am not sure if they're always 100% on the same page when it comes to the outlook of this terrorist group. So Öcalan, of course, has an influence on the process, but he's not the sole leader or sole key ringleader of the group anymore. So he's not the sole decision maker. He does still, I think, has a lot of influence on their base and the supporting elements. But when it comes to the decision-making processes, there's other leaders that he now shares power with.
Mehmet, since we're talking about the PKK, there's a group called the Syrian Democratic Forces. It's dominated by the PKK and YPG. How important is their integration into the Syrian army, and how influential is that, not just for Syrian security, but also Turkey's sovereignty?
Well, SDF or YPG, Turkey sees no difference between them. And as there are different acronyms, basically the United States used to arm the YPG, which is the offshoot of PKK in northern Syria, under the pretext of fight against Daesh. I mean, everybody knows, I think the United States very well know, the international community knows that the YPG predominantly, is effective in what is called SDF. How they integrate into northern Syria, to Syrian new administration, that is important. What that will look like is very important, I think, because if the YPG is willing to integrate into into Syrian government or Syrian state now, that should not come with conditions, because the unity, to maintain that unity within Syria, to maintain this territorial integrity, to maintain the country as a united actor, that integration should not come with some conditions that will look like that will put, give the YPG or the SDF different powers within the Syrian government or within the Syrian state. Nevertheless, this doesn't mean that there shouldn't be inclusion when it comes to different ethnic groups. As we know, during Assad regime, for many decades, different groups suffered, different ethnic groups or religious minorities. Now the Ahmed al-Shara government is promising that they're going to be more inclusive, and they have so far shown very positive signs that they're going to be that. But for that to happen, actually, the YPG needs to lay down arms and try to be active as agents within the new reconstruction phase. They should positively contribute as Syrian citizens, nothing more. Of course, there is the elements within the YPG that are actually foreign nationals. So what will happen to them, that is something that time will show. But for Turkey and for Syria, for their safety, security, territorial integrity, for their political unity, the PKK or YPG or SDF should have no place in their future. And neither Turkey nor Syria should tolerate any sort of, and will not tolerate any sort of mechanism that will act as an autonomous either armed group or political entity within a unified country. So I think, of course, it is important for Turkey's sovereignty, and Turkey will put boots on the ground if necessary to eliminate that threat, as they have done previously. Now there's this agreement that they will lay down arms and integrate into northern Syria. But if the new Syrian administration wants a unified future, they will also have to be on the same page with Turkey, because this is not only important for Turkey, but also important for a unified Syria, a stable Syria, and a peaceful Syrian community.
Mehmet, this weekend, the U.S. ambassador to Turkey, Thomas J. Barak, he was in Izmir, where he was interviewed by Anadolu Agency, which is the state agency. He made some interesting remarks. He said that Turkey is a key actor in the Middle East for stability amid ongoing conflicts. Now, considering this statement and the recent news that we just received that Turkey is going to be hosting the NATO summit next year in Ankara, so obviously we're all excited. How important could this be? Because we don't know what the outcome is going to be for the wars that are ongoing in the region right now and globally as well. For example, when you see what's happening in Ukraine. So how important would Turkey's role be? It's still important, but as we race towards the NATO summit for next year, how important could Turkey's position be when it hosts the summit and all world leaders are here and they realize how important Turkey's position has been over the years as well? Just to break down your question, first of all, to be very, very frank, these NATO summits or these some of these international summits, they are not, significant when it comes to making decisions right at that summit. Usually, the preparation works actually are more important, or the follow-ups. So, of course, the leaders get together sometimes on the sidelines, but in terms of, hosting the event or the events, whether they're in Turkey or elsewhere, there isn't much significance to the when it comes to the content of these or the effectiveness of these summits. But this does not mean that
the preparation work and also the follow-up does not produce any significant outcomes. First of all, when we look at the agenda, for example, in The Hague last week, we know that, of course, the bilateral meetings were more important than the actual the declaration. We know that Ukraine was on the agenda and the spending, defense spending was on the agenda, but Israel-Iran conflict overshadowed the content of that. Nevertheless, when it comes to the other part of your question, Turkey's importance, Turkey is, of course, the second largest army in the NATO. Turkey is one of the key contributors when it comes to defense spending. But I think when it comes to acting as a buffer zone between what the NATO considers, and I'm not referring geographically, but as a country with political influence in its region, actually a political influence that goes beyond its region even, Turkey acts as a stabilizer in the relations between Russia, let's say, and some of the NATO members or NATO as a bloc. When that is the play, I mean, we saw that very significantly in the Ukraine talks and the negotiations between Ukraine and Russia when it comes to prisoners exchange, when it comes to the grain deal. They held two meetings in Istanbul in May and June. Now they're going to, Mr. Putin voiced that they want to hold the third one. So Turkey is important in that sense. When it comes to the stability in the Middle East, particularly when it comes to Syria, for example, Turkey is part of that. I mean, Turkey's importance is very significant on the southern leg of NATO, basically. But when it comes to Mr. Ambassador's visit to Izmir over the weekend, and he made some important statements previously as well when it comes to Turkey's role, what it means to be an ambassador in Turkey. As a Lebanese Christian envoy, his parents actually moved to United States from what is known as Lebanon right now in the beginning of the 20th century, in the 1900s. Back then it was Ottoman Empire, basically, right? So when that was, with that, I think he has this sense of nostalgia. As a side note, I'm saying this, coming back to this land, coming back to this territory, meeting and engaging with the people of Turkey and the wider region, I think it has that sense of connectedness. As a personal connection, Mr. Ambassador Thomas Barak is, I think, evaluating that emotionally in one way. But of course, that's at a personal level. At a professional and political level, he's also a person that knows this region very well, aside from his personal background. He has been in the region actually working with connections started dating back to 1970s. One of his first appointments, I believe, during his professional career was to Saudi Arabia in the 70s. Before this is long before his political career, or perhaps even before his real estate business. Nevertheless, he's a person that is very close to Mr. Trump, and he acknowledges that relationship with Mr. Erdoğan, between Mr. Erdoğan and Mr. Trump, and I think he's acting as a facilitator to bring ties back to where they're supposed to be. During Biden administration, we saw a period of interregnum, a period of that was very idle, rather than an active engagement between two strong NATO allies, between two historically strategic allies, between two countries that have very similar outlooks at many different levels, although they have had ups and downs, although they have very significant disagreements on issues like the armament of YPG in northern Syria, when it comes to the presence of veto in the United States, or when it comes to Israel. There is this disagreement, but I think Mr. Trump acknowledges that Turkey is an actor that cannot be ignored if, for their own U.S. interests, for the NATO's interest, and for the stability of the region. Turkey is not an actor that can be sidelined when it comes to security and political stability of the region. And with two key leaders, Mr. Erdoğan and Mr. Trump, I think, even when it comes to the removal of sanctions from Syria, which Trump signed a couple days ago, with the executive order, Mr. Erdoğan was very influential in that. Mr. Trump knows that Turkey is very active when it comes to Ukraine and Russia conflict. So with, Mr. Ambassador coming with a positive agenda and a very close ally of Trump, I think he's going to, his agenda will be basically focused on as a facilitator between the two countries that will focus more on positive agenda and the United States utilizing Turkey more in the region as a strong and significant key leader that its influence goes beyond its region. So I think that relationship needs to be solidified. And so far, Mr. Trump, Mr. Rubio, and Mr. Barack has very positive agendas and positive tone in setting up this relationship between Turkey and the United States.
Mehmet, thanks for that analysis. We'll be right back with you.
Thank you.
Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan and British counterpart David Lammy held talks in Ankara on Monday amid deepening bilateral ties and addressing regional security.
Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan hosted British Foreign Secretary David Lammy in Ankara on Monday for talks focused on strengthening bilateral ties and addressing key regional and international security challenges. The two ministers discussed expanding cooperation in areas such as trade, defense, and energy, as well as coordinating on pressing security concerns ranging from the conflicts in Ukraine and Gaza to the situation in the Middle East. Fidan emphasized that Türkiye and the United Kingdom enjoy strong and strategic relations, adding that close cooperation is vital to maintaining regional stability and countering terrorism and organized crime. Lammy underlined the importance of Türkiye as a NATO ally and partner on regional security issues, including efforts to support Ukraine and ease tensions in the Middle East. Both sides reiterated their support for Ukraine's sovereignty, a political settlement in Syria, and diplomatic initiatives aimed at achieving a lasting ceasefire in Gaza. The visit is expected to pave the way for continued high-level dialogue in the months ahead, including preparations for a future strategic partnership meeting.
Welcome back to the program. Now let's take a look at the top story from Daily Sabah. Mehmet, we were talking about the PKK, we were talking about the NATO summit, we were talking about the presidential system. These were some of the things that Turkish President Erdoğan addressed after the cabinet meeting yesterday. But the most important one was, despite shocks, economic program not shaken.
Well, Mr. Erdoğan actually had another meeting yesterday prior to the cabinet, the talks after, following the cabinet meeting. But his focus was echoed again during his statements after the cabinet meeting. It's about the strength of economy, actually about the strength of economic program, because Turkey's economy was, for the lack of a better word, it was in a crisis that started a little before even the pandemic. And during pandemic, we were hit by strong inflation. That recovery period has been taking long. With the new economy minister, Mehmet Şimşek, initiating this program after the government was in place in 2024, 2023, now we see that now actually the program is bearing fruit now, that the outcomes of this program are actually becoming more visible. And one of the biggest, I think, indicators is the inflation. The speed of inflation going up has slowed down over many months now, and now actually it is going to be perhaps in the coming months in a bracket between 19 to 24%. That was much higher. Now it's going to be in the numbers in 20% and in the 20s. This is despite all the shocks, different effects that Turkey had to deal with, be it at regional, geopolitical indicators, or when it comes to the energy prices. Nevertheless, Turkey's effective stance on price stability, effective and firm position when it comes to making sure that the economic program does not compromise, and they're sticking to it very hardly. I think that's now bearing fruit, and now actually we see some visible changes. But on the other hand, Turkey's exports has been very significant. So every month-on-month results show that Turkey is breaking records, historic records, when it comes to Turkey exporting. And one of the biggest elements in this Turkey's export success is, of course, the drones. Turkish Bayraktar drones, for example. They are now, Turkey is now producing one of every 2 or one of every 3 drones worldwide, and Turkey is exporting these as well, not just only for domestic use, but also they're exporting drones and defense products to many different parts of the world. And I think these very value-added, high-value products are also boosting Turkey's export capacity, Turkey's export muscle, and that is also, of course, acting as a key indicator or a key factor for the economic resilience and economic effectiveness of Turkey.
Mehmet, thanks for that analysis.
Thank you.
Now let's take a look at this news report, and we'll be right back.
Israeli strikes killed at least 60 people across Gaza on Monday in some of the heaviest attacks in weeks. Medics said at least 20 people, including women, children, and a local journalist, were killed at this beachfront cafe in Gaza City. Abu Abdullah said he saw a missile from a warplane hit the area, which he described as a popular recreational spot for families. The bombardment came as Israeli officials were traveling to Washington for a new ceasefire push by U.S. President Donald Trump. Trump on Sunday called to make the deal in Gaza, get the hostages back. Here's White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt on Monday.
And the president himself speaks frequently, as you know, to Prime Minister Netanyahu. But this has been a priority for the president since he took office, to end this brutal war in Gaza.
But on the ground in Gaza, there's no sign of fighting letting up. The Israeli military issued evacuation orders on Monday to residents in large districts in the northern Gaza Strip, forcing a new wave of displacement. Palestinian and Egyptian sources with knowledge of the latest ceasefire efforts said that mediators Qatar and Egypt have stepped up their contacts with the two warring sides, but that no date has been set yet for a new round of truce talks.
Welcome back to the program. Joining us now from Manchester is strategic affairs expert Dr. Hamid Khan Al-Mashriqi. Dr. Hamid, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Umar. Thank you.
Dr. Hamid, we've been hearing some reports from Israeli media outlets that the death toll in Gaza has been misreported, has been underreported. Right now, the Gazan Health Ministry says that the death toll stands at 57,000, but Israeli outlets have been saying that the death toll could be well above 100,000. What do you have to say about that?
Definitely, Umar. I mean, that was misleading prior. And I mean, most of other media houses and reported were saying that the death toll is much higher than which has been told so far. And I mean, I have no doubt that it would have crossed over 100,000 the way Israeli forces have carried on their genocide. And to be honest, it is a very sad situation. It is a very catastrophic, and it is not about the death toll of 100,000. It is about every single individual in Gaza Strip is affected by it. Every single, all 2 million are affected, whether they're family members, whether they're close relatives. Somebody has been killed in these attacks. And on the other hand, the whole area have been turned into a rubble. And, there is no, I would say, there is no justification for this bombardment from Israel, whatever they are doing, and they are not discriminating anything there whatsoever. They are bombing, schools, hospitals, shelters, and then NGOs, United Nations institutions, safe homes or shelters. So, I mean, this death toll is very catastrophic, very dangerous. I would say that this is the time that not only go for the truce and ceasefire, also there should be some mechanism to hold Netanyahu responsible for it, because it is Netanyahu and Israel who must be held responsible for this genocide. But one thing is very clear, that despite of all that, they have not been succeeded to eliminate Hamas completely, because because of the people's support they still have. And secondly, they have not been able to get the release of all hostages. So in many fronts, there is no success for Netanyahu. Rather, he has been failed, and he has taken his revenge from the people of Palestine, people of Gaza, and this is the time when the world must react even stronger than ever.
Dr. Hamid, last Friday, we saw President Trump giving us some statements saying that a ceasefire could be on the cards. A ceasefire could be achieved very soon between Hamas and the Israeli forces and the Israeli government. And, this week, there was a trial set for Benjamin Netanyahu, one of his corruption trials. That was cancelled by a local court. How are you seeing the relationship between Trump and Netanyahu at this point? And can we expect an actual ceasefire at this point?
I'm always saying that it is only American pressure which can force Netanyahu to agree on ceasefire. And there is no doubt that President Trump is very much serious to achieve ceasefire, and he has been saying that. But the only thing is in which terms there will be ceasefire. If they are thinking or considering to have a ceasefire on relocation of 2 million people of Gaza, it is not going to be acceptable for them. There has to be ceasefire with the, I would say, with the mediation efforts from Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and other countries, including Turkey and all the regional countries. And I think there can be a very important role could have been played by Qatar and Saudi Arabia to achieve the right way of ceasefire. And secondly, Trump at the moment is, hosting Israeli administration and senior officials. I think they need to draw some roadmap for the peace and for future of Gaza as well. And then two-state solution must be on the table for a permanent solution of this conflict, which is bringing, very serious crisis after every few years. So this is the thing, I think, where Trump has to work a lot. And if they are talking about, other nations to accept, have a friendly relationship with Israel and other things, it is must that there must be a truce, there must be a ceasefire, and there must be a plan for rehabilitation and restoration of Gaza and rehabilitation of the people of Gaza.
Dr. Hamid, thank you for joining us on the program. It was a pleasure listening to your analysis. Dr. Mehmet, thank you to you as well for being with us in the studio.
Thank you, Omar.
That brings us to the end of our program. Thanks for joining us. Bye for now.